For decades, the world saw India as a sleeping giant, a land of culture, spirituality, and diversity, but not as a nation of cutting-edge military technology. They thought India could build rockets to the moon, but not missiles that could defend her borders. They thought India could train engineers for Silicon Valley, but not scientists who could design the world's most sophisticated defense systems. But those days are gone. Today, the silence of India's laboratory speaks louder than the roar of any battlefield. Because what India is building isn't just for today, it's technology that's already 10 years ahead of the world. And the proof, my friend, is right in front of every global superpower's eyes. Let's start with something that changed the game forever. The BRIH-MALS missile, a weapon so fast, so accurate, and so devastating that even the United States and China had to take a second look. When most countries are still testing hypersonic systems, India's BRIH-MALS has already reached operational perfection, flying at nearly Mach 3, hugging the sea's surface. Invisible to radar until it's too late, this missile has become the gold standard of precision strike weapons. And here's the kicker. It's not just India using it anymore. The Philippines, Vietnam, and even Middle Eastern nations are lining up to get it. Because they know one thing. When you buy Indian defense tech, you're not just buying power. You're buying reliability. You're buying deterrence. You're buying time itself. And while the world debates speed, India has already mastered it. That's what the Akash NG air defense system is all about. Developed with indigenous radar, indigenous missile launchers, indigenous guidance, all made in India. The new generation Akash can track and destroy multiple targets, even stealth fighters simultaneously. Compare that with some Western systems which rely on joint partnerships or imported parts. India has managed to cut dependence entirely. That's not just progress, that's sovereignty turned into science. But you see, this didn't happen overnight. This was born from years of patience, years of being ignored, and years of being underestimated when the world denied India access to advanced military technology. After nuclear tests in 1998, something powerful awakened. India said, "Fine, we'll build our own." That's when the Defense Research and Development Organization, DRDO, became more than just a government agency. It became a symbol of defiance. From that moment forward, India's scientists were no longer just developing weapons. They were rewriting the future. Look at the Tejas fighter jet. Once mocked by critics who said India could never produce a fourth-generation jet, it now flies shoulder to shoulder with some of the world's best. With its fly-by-wire control system, composite materials, and radar that can track multiple targets at once, Tejas represents something deeper than technology. It represents identity. Because when a nation builds its own fighter jet, it declares that its skies belong to no one else. And the upcoming Tejas, Mk2, and the AMCA, Advanced Medium Combat Aircraft Project, they're not just keeping up. They're setting the next global standard. Even in the realm of space defense, India has pulled off what others didn't expect for another decade. Remember March 2019? The world woke up to see India successfully testing an anti-satellite weapon, Mission Shakti. That made India the fourth nation in the world to demonstrate such capability after the US, Russia, and China. But what the world didn't fully grasp was how quickly India achieved it. From conceptualization to execution, it took less than 2 years. That's not just technological advancement. That's a national will that moves faster than bureaucracy, faster than geopolitics. And if you want to understand how deep India's innovation runs, look at the K4 and K, 15 missiles that can be launched from submarines deep underwater. While other nations are still talking about developing second strike capability, India already has it operational. A submarine fleet equipped with nuclear capable missiles means one thing: deterrence through invisibility. You can't fight what you can't find. And the Indian Navy has mastered that art quietly, without chest thumping, without global headlines. Let's not forget the artificial intelligence and drone revolution that's shaping modern warfare. India isn't watching it happen, it's leading it. Take the swarm drones tested by the Indian Air Force. Hundreds of drones communicating in real time, adapting to battlefield conditions, and overwhelming defenses. That's not science fiction. That's India's defense reality. Add to that the use of AI in radar systems, predictive maintenance, and autonomous vehicles, and you'll see how far ahead India is compared to nations still relying on foreign software or imported algorithms. Even the humble artillery has been transformed. The ATAGS Advanced Towed Artillery Gun System developed by Bharat Forge and DRDO shattered world records during trials. It fired shells farther than any gun in its class anywhere in the world. That's not luck. That's design brilliance born out of necessity. Because India understood that wars of tomorrow won't be fought by numbers, but by precision, endurance, and intelligence. And let's talk about the big one, the S-400. When India purchased this system from Russia, people thought it was just another arms deal. But here's what they missed. India didn't just buy the S-400, it studied, modified, and integrated it into its own indigenous defense grid. The result, India's radar network is now one of the most sophisticated in Asia. Combined with indigenous early warning systems, India's defense layer is so advanced that it can track threats from hundreds of kilometers away. That's not imitation. That's innovation through assimilation. But what really separates India from everyone else isn't just the technology, it's the philosophy behind it. You see, India isn't in the arms race for dominance. It's in it for deterrence. India's strategy has always been rooted in the principle of defend, not dominate. But here's the irony. By focusing on defense, India is accidentally leading the world. Its innovations are not designed to start wars, but to end them before they begin. That's the kind of wisdom that comes from centuries of civilization, not decades of politics. And now the West is noticing. The United States has started developing jet engines with India. France is offering deep defense collaboration. Even Russia, India's oldest ally, is restructuring its defense programs to align with India's innovation speed. Why? Because every capital knows that India's scientific progress is not linear. It's exponential. It's like watching someone leap 10 years into the future while others are still trying to walk straight. When you step into India's defense production hubs today, you won't find outdated machinery or borrowed designs. You'll find 3D printers manufacturing jet parts. You'll find quantum computing simulations for radar interference. You'll find engineers barely out of their 20s designing stealth coatings that rival any in the world. And that's where the real story lies. The next generation of Indian scientists who don't carry the burden of doubt. They're born in an era where Make in India isn't a slogan, it's a declaration. Look at what's happening with the Gaganyaan project, India's manned space mission. People think that's about exploration, but it's far more than that. The technology that makes human spaceflight possible, life support systems, re-entry heat shields, propulsion control, is the same tech that empowers defense systems. That's dual-use innovation. India's ability to convert space technology into military application and vice versa is what gives it that decade-long advantage. Even cyber defense, one of the most underestimated battlefields of modern warfare, is where India shines. With one of the world's largest IT infrastructures, India has fortified its cyber command with AI-driven security encryption protocols and counter-hacking systems that rival global standards. You can't just hack India anymore. The walls are digital and visible and learning in real time. That's the future of warfare. And India's already living in it. People used to laugh when India talked about self-reliance in defense. They said it was impossible for a developing country to match the might of the West or the secrecy of the East. But while they laughed, India worked. And while they doubted, India delivered. Today, it stands as the only country that can buy from anyone yet still build everything itself. That's independence in its purest form. And let's not forget the role of private defense companies. A decade ago, the idea of India's private sector producing world-class military tech seemed far-fetched. But now, startups are designing drones, sensors, electronic warfare systems, and even unmanned ground vehicles. The government opened the doors and innovation flooded in. India's defense sector isn't a monopoly, it's a movement. Every invention builds on another, every challenge turns into collaboration, and every setback fuels another breakthrough. If you ever doubt India's progress, look at the export numbers. 10 years ago, India barely sold $200 million worth of defense equipment. Today, it's crossing $3 billion and climbing. Nations once hesitant to buy from India now consider it a reliable supplier. The same countries that once sold India weapons are now asking for co-development deals. That's not just proof, that's poetic justice. Even in naval warfare, India's 10-year lead is showing. The IS Vikrant, India's indigenously built aircraft carrier, isn't just a ship, it's a floating city of power. From its engines to its arrestor systems, it's built with Indian technology. Add to that India's stealth destroyers, the P-75 submarines, and the upcoming nuclear-powered fleet, and you've got a Navy that can project power across 2 oceans. That's not future planning, that's future happening right now. And then there's the human factor. Technology can only go so far without the people who wield it. Indian soldiers today operate advanced equipment with the precision and discipline of world-class professionals. Their training integrates augmented reality, simulation, and AI-based analysis. It's not about muscle anymore, it's about mindset. When you combine courage with code, valor with vision, and tradition with technology, you get something unstoppable. So when analysts say India is 10 years ahead, they're not exaggerating. Because while others are still planning for tomorrow, India is already testing the systems that define tomorrow. Whether it's hypersonic glide vehicles, next-gen stealth drones, directed energy weapons, or AI-driven combat support systems, India is already laying the groundwork. And the world is beginning to notice that the real competition is no longer between superpowers. It's between vision and hesitation, and India has no hesitation left. What's more fascinating is how India's advancements are deeply moral. This is a nation that refuses to weaponize chaos. You won't see India launching unprovoked attacks or manipulating global conflicts. Its weapons exist to create stability, not disorder. That's what makes its military technology unique. It carries ethics in its design. Every invention, every missile, every system is built with restraint coded into its DNA. That's why when other nations boast, India observes. When others provoke, India prepares. And when others threaten, India advances silently. That silence is power. Because every global capital finally understands India's quiet confidence was never submission, it was preparation for dominance. For years, the world misread India's silence. They saw calmness and mistook it for compliance. They saw humility and mistook it for hesitation. But while the world debated, India was calculating. While others were shouting, India was studying. While superpowers were drawing lines on maps, India was quietly redrawing the blueprint of power itself. Every global capital realizes now India's quiet confidence was never submission, it was preparation for dominance. You see, dominance doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. And India has mastered that art. For decades, the West dictated who could lead in technology, who could control global narratives, and who could dominate defense. But while others competed for attention, India focused on intention. It didn't build weapons to impress, it built them to endure. Every missile test, every space launch, every cyber upgrade was part of a larger plan, a plan that didn't need validation from anyone else. When the world placed sanctions on India, it expected silence to mean surrender. But that silence became a shield. India took that isolation and turned it into innovation. Denied foreign technology, India built its own. Denied global partnerships, it created domestic ecosystems. Denied access to elite defense circles, it formed its own. That's why, when nations see India's breakthroughs today, they finally understand this wasn't a miracle. It was meticulous. Think about this. The same country that once imported fighter jets is now exporting them. The same nation that was told it couldn't sustain a defense industry now supplies cutting-edge technology to its allies. That didn't happen because of sudden luck. It happened because of decades of quiet, deliberate effort. When India says it's self-reliant, it's not boasting, it's reporting progress that's already reshaping global power dynamics. India's quiet confidence came from one simple realization. True power doesn't need applause, it needs results. Every successful missile launch, every indigenously produced submarine, every AI defense network, these aren't just achievements, they're statements. Statements to a world that once doubted India's potential. And now, those same nations study India's defense models to understand how a developing country transformed into a technological powerhouse without relying on anyone else's playbook. When India refrains from responding to provocation, it isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Because India doesn't react out of anger, it acts out of calculation. Every step is timed, every move is measured. When others rush to showcase strength, India lets results speak. And those results, whether in missile precision, space capability, or cyber defense, speak in a language of mastery. That's what unnerves global powers. Not India's words, but its silence backed by progress. In the international arena, perception is everything. For years, India was perceived as the world's back office, a service provider, not a strategic player. But today that narrative has collapsed. Because when you look at India's military technology, you realize this isn't a country outsourcing its potential anymore. It's owning it. From quantum communication to directed energy weapons, India is no longer participating in the future. It's defining it. Every capital that once overlooked India now studies its rise with fascination and sometimes fear. Washington sees India as an indispensable ally in maintaining balance in Asia. Moscow recognizes India as an equal, not a junior partner. Paris sees India as the key to defense co-development. Beijing sees India as the one regional force that can challenge its dominance without firing a single bullet. And every Middle Eastern capital now understands that India's growing power brings stability, not disruption. But this dominance didn't come through aggression. It came through awareness. India understood that in a world obsessed with visibility, invisibility is an asset. It didn't announce every project. It unveiled them only when perfection was reached. When the BRH-Miles missile was revealed, it wasn't an experiment. It was excellence delivered. When the Chandrayaan and Mangali missions succeeded, it wasn't about space. It was about signaling to the world that Indian minds could achieve anything. This quiet confidence also changed how India deals with diplomacy. Earlier, the global order dictated who spoke first and who followed. But now, when Indian diplomats walk into international meetings, they walk with the authority of results. They don't need to demand respect. They command it because nations respect performance, not promises. And India's track record in defense, economy, and global leadership proves that performance has become its second nature. When global powers pressured India to take sides, India simply smiled. It didn't bend left or right, it stood tall in the center. And that center is now the axis of balance. The West calls it neutrality, but India calls it independence. By staying calm amidst chaos, India didn't lose influence, it multiplied it. Every decision made in New Delhi today echoes through Washington, Moscow, Brussels, and Beijing. That's the kind of soft dominance that comes not from shouting, but from showing. You see, preparation is a silent art. When India was developing the Agni missile series, most of the world barely paid attention. They saw test failures and smirked. But they didn't realize India wasn't aiming for quick wins. It was crafting reliability. And now, those same missiles stand as a credible deterrent that protects 1 billion lives. That's the difference between nations that chase recognition and nations that build resilience. Even in defense exports, India's rise wasn't overnight. It built trust step by step. Instead of selling aggression, India sold assurance. Instead of fueling conflicts, it offered security. That's why countries across Africa, Southeast Asia, and the Middle East are eager to buy Indian defense systems. They know that Indian technology doesn't come with political strings. It comes with stability. And that's the foundation of long-term dominance. When global leaders visit India today, they no longer see it as a potential partner. They see it as a necessary one. Because every discussion about the Indo-Pacific cybersecurity or global supply chains now includes India's opinion as a decisive factor. That shift in perception is the ultimate symbol of power. Not military parades or economic boasts, but quiet recognition from those who once overlooked you. Even India's approach to technology development reflects this calm authority. The nation doesn't rush to showcase prototypes. It perfects them. The DRDO doesn't advertise every success. It internalizes lessons from every failure. The Indian Armed Forces don't flaunt their operations. They execute them with surgical precision. That's what scares rivals. The unpredictability that comes from composure. You can prepare for an enemy that boasts, but how do you prepare for one that plans silently? The new India doesn't shout slogans. It builds legacies. Its quiet dominance can be felt in defense corridors, global trade negotiations, and even space exploration. From building fifth-generation aircraft to launching reusable rockets, India is building systems that not only serve its needs, but shape the world's future. And the best part, it's doing all this without arrogance. Because India's pride isn't in showing power, it's in controlling it. Every time a global crisis unfolds, notice how India reacts. When supply chains crumble, India stabilizes them. When conflicts break out, India mediates peace. When others weaponize information, India leverages innovation. That's how true dominance looks. It's not about starting storms, it's about calming them. India's quiet confidence lies in its ability to balance the world when others are busy unbalancing it. It's fascinating how India's military advancements mirror its cultural philosophy. The concept of Shakti, power controlled by wisdom, has guided India's evolution. It's not about overpowering others, it's about empowering oneself. That's why Indian technology doesn't just intimidate, it inspires. The nation's strength isn't born from ego, but from endurance. Its dominance isn't loud, yet it's lasting. And now, the same nations that once lectured India on technology and policy are turning toward it for guidance. They've realized that India's model works, not because it imitates others, but because it integrates the best of both worlds, a blend of Eastern depth and Western innovation. That's why India's solutions in defense and technology are so efficient. They're built on balance. Every global capital is paying attention now. You can sense it in policy shifts, in partnerships, in media tones. The same skepticism that once surrounded India's rise has transformed into admiration. Western think tanks call it strategic patience. Economists call it long-term positioning. But India simply calls it preparation. Because what they see today, a nation that commands respect on every global stage, is the result of years of invisible effort. And the beauty of it all, India never had to declare dominance. It simply became dominant without wars, without invasions, without intimidation, through intelligence, innovation, and integrity. While others tried to own the world through might, India learned to lead it through mastery. That's what quiet confidence looks like. It doesn't ask for permission to shine. India's preparation has always been layered, multidimensional, and deeply rooted in its civilization's wisdom. It built nuclear deterrence not to threaten, but to protect. It built satellites not just for navigation, but for national security. It developed drones not for show, but for strategic autonomy. Every invention carries intent, and that intent has always been peace through preparedness. When you look at the global power balance today, you'll see something extraordinary. Nations that were once considered giants are now struggling to adapt to rapid technological shifts. But India, it's already living in that future. Because preparation isn't about reacting fast, it's about thinking ahead. India was thinking ahead when others were doubting its capabilities. It was planning for this decade when others were planning for the next election. Now, when a new weapons system is announced or a new space project is launched, the world doesn't ask, can India do it? They ask, how did India do it so fast? That's when you know dominance has shifted. When questions change from doubt to curiosity, you've already won. India's quiet preparation turned disbelief into respect and respect into reliance. That's why every capital, from Washington to Moscow, from London to Tokyo, now acknowledges India's strategic maturity. They know that India doesn't move impulsively. It moves intentionally. It doesn't seek validation. It creates validation. That's why every alliance now needs India's handshake to feel complete. Every global decision now feels incomplete without India's consent. And the irony, India never rushed to prove itself. It just kept proving others wrong by doing what it does best. Working in silence, the laboratories, the factories, the command centers, they became temples of quiet revolution. And that revolution is now visible in every sphere, from defense exports to diplomatic leverage. This quiet confidence is what defines India's new age of dominance. Because when a nation learns to combine patience with power, strategy with strength,